You think you know this story. The girl who survived, the intruder who vanished. But inside that house, the killer left something behind, a clue that no one understood. 10 years later, that clue begins to unravel a darker conspiracy, a web of unimaginable evil. Who was the real killer? And why are they coming back? I'm Clyde, and the answer is waiting for you on the Best Mystery Book Podcast.
Part 2. The Escape. We know where you are. Laverne Parker. Fall 2015, 2 years later. Chapter 7. Tuesday, September 29th, 2015. Paris, France, 1:35 p.m. The escape was flawless. The funds had been transferred to a blind trust. The University of Cambridge had accepted her based on stellar high school academics and never questioned why she'd taken a gap year. The chartered flight cost a fortune, but she had plenty of money since winning her defamation case, and she knew it was imperative to slip out of the United States without the press knowing about it. Each detail had been meticulously planned and skillfully executed. It was everything that happened afterward that went to hell. Shipping Alexandra Quinlan to a foreign country, alone and so soon after the traumatic events of losing her family and enduring a very public and difficult trial, may have been necessary and the only way to protect her, but it was a flawed plan from the beginning. It held too many variables and came with a complicated set of assumptions. The first was that, after a tumultuous and psychologically traumatic 2 years, Alexandra Quinlan would fall in line with the rest of society and go with the flow. The second was that Alex would actually attend college, excel in the environment of higher education, and generally adjust to the new life she had escaped to. None of those expectations held, because when the dust settled, so too did the guilt. The guilt of surviving the night her family was killed. The guilt of hiding while she watched her brother die. The guilt of spending the immediate months after the tragedy defending herself rather than in mourning. The guilt of attempting to move on with life rather than hunting for answers to why a still unknown intruder had entered her home on a cold January night and killed her family. Although the move to England had worked in the sense that it allowed Alex to escape the American media, it was the concept of school and classes and study that failed. The idea of dormitory life with a roommate was so unappealing that she had never considered it. Alex fled the United States to get away from her past. She escaped to Cambridge because it was a place where no one knew her or what had happened to her. It was a place where no one would make the connection to the notorious night when she was accused of killing her family. Had she opted to live in the dormitory with a roommate rather than alone in her own apartment, it would have brought probing questions about Alex's life and her family, about her parents and brother, about what things were like back home. To these questions, Alex would have had to hem and haw and lie through her teeth because she would never be able to properly explain that she didn't have a home. Not since that night more than 2 years earlier, when the figure in the long trench coat had invaded the place she once called home. After that moment, Alex had places. First, it was Allegheny, the juvenile detention center, where she spent 2 months after she was arrested. Next was the Lancasters' home in Washington, D.C., where she secretly lived with Garrett and Donna, and began gathering evidence and mounting an argument against the McIntosh Police Department and the District Attorney's Office. After Alex won her defamation case against the state of Virginia, which concluded with Alex being awarded a small fortune in damages, the media fervently searched for her whereabouts. When things became too overwhelming, Alex fled to the Lancasters' vacation home, which was tucked in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. But it was obvious by then that the reporters and true crime fanatics would rest at nothing less than finding and questioning empty eyes about the heinous crimes they still, and would forever, believe she committed. During her year in hiding, rumors frequently broke on true crime websites that someone had spotted empty eyes at a particular hotel, and the freaks and geeks would flock there. News vans would roll to the hotel entrance and shoot footage of protesters holding signs and chanting their hatred toward her, their favorite, and least inventive in Alex's opinion was, "Alex Q, it was you. Alex Q, it was you." While the media and the true crime nuts breathlessly searched for her, Garrett and Donna kept her hidden. When the pressure built to the point of explosion, they hatched the plan for Alex to head overseas. Attending an American university was out of the question. In a foreign country, she would at least have a chance at anonymity. So England it was. The University of Cambridge was where Alex was supposed to study for 4 years. It was where she was supposed to run and hide and catch her breath. It was where a fresh start was supposed to be found. The myth lasted 1 year, although the charade was still ongoing today. Donna and Garrett believed school was going swimmingly well. Alex returned to the United States and spent the summer after freshman year hiding again at the Lancasters' vacation home and lying to them about how well she was doing at school and how many friends she had made, about how Cambridge was becoming her new home, and how she couldn't wait to go back for her second year. Why Alex had been unable to tell them the truth was something she could not fully explain. She owed Garrett and Donna so much for what they'd done for her. Coming clean about school felt like a betrayal. So at the end of summer, Alex packed her things and jumped on a plane back to England under the ruse of starting her sophomore year. Heading back to Europe had become imperative, but Alex was going for reasons other than education. She was hunting for answers to why her family had been killed. And as she boarded the train in the Paris Gare de Lyon for the 4-hour ride to Zurich, Switzerland, she was following the only lead she had come across in more than a year of searching. Chapter 8. Tuesday, September 29th, 2015. Alex took her seat in the train's first-class cabin and spread the pages on the table in front of her. The documents had started her on this leg of her journey. They were the first real clue she had come across in a search that started more than a year ago. Alex studied the papers again, trying to understand the numbers. But no matter how hard she worked to decipher the information, she was missing a key bit of information. Alex hoped to find it in Switzerland. Boisson. Alex looked up to see a female attendant offering a menu. None, mercy. When the server left to attend to the next passenger, Alex rested her head back and closed her eyes. After that fateful January night, when Alex was led out of her home and into the hot lights of the television news cameras, and then in the months that followed, and especially during the landmark lawsuit she brought against the state of Virginia, the public had gotten to know Alexandra Quinlan. They knew her name, they knew her face, they knew her eyes. For a full year, her image had been plastered across newspapers, tabloids, and nightly newscasts. The American public was so starved for morbid details about the tragic night the Quinlan family was slaughtered that they allowed an innocent teenager to become a caricature of a pop culture obsessed with true crime. To the public, Alexandra Quinlan was not a young girl who lost her family. She was the villain in a true crime saga. And from that saga, they wanted twists and surprises and bombshell revelations. They had gotten plenty of that during the bungled investigation, and even more during the lawsuit she filed against the state of Virginia, during which all the dirty details were laid bare. The entire ordeal culminated with a final plot twist no one saw coming: Alex's disappearance from the public eye. During the trial, and still today, the American news media were desperate to find her, and not for any good or noble reasons. The media wanted to hunt Alexandra Quinlan down and burn her at the stake. Despite a mountain of evidence proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Alex had not killed her family, and had in fact narrowly escaped death herself, the vultures in the true crime community refused to believe any of it. And ever since winning a massive settlement in her defamation case against the state of Virginia, making her a millionaire many times over, the true crime nuts were frenzied to locate her, question her, expose her lies, and make sure the rest of her lies. Life was a living hell. As if every detail of her life had not already been laid bare for the world to see, the press wanted more. They always wanted more. And Alex had nearly given it to them. The idea of granting a prominent reporter an exclusive had been floated early on as a way to put it all to rest. But the suggestion was quickly squashed. Granting a single interview would be like chumming the water. It would attract thousands of other reporters, podcasters, and true crime fanatics hoping for the same access. Her only option had been to up and vanish. So she did. Wah. Alex opened her eyes and watched the countryside blur past as the train rumbled from France to Switzerland. She passed through small towns with houses perched in the foothills and the snow-capped Alps in the distance. Just a couple of years ago, she had never been out of the United States. She had barely been out of Virginia, save for a grade school trip across the Potomac to visit Washington, D.C., and a few family vacations to Florida. And here she was now, 20 years old, and sitting on a train slicing through Europe. A lot had changed in 2 years. She'd come a long way from that frightened teenager who'd hid behind the grandfather clock after her family had been gunned down. Today she was no longer hiding. Today she had become the hunter. She made a pledge to herself to spend every waking hour searching for answers to the night her family was killed. She made this her first priority because she knew no one else was looking. Only reluctantly, and with great pressure from Garrett Lancaster and his powerful law firm, had the McIntosh police and the Allegheny County District Attorney dropped the charges against her. Despite everything, the charges being dismissed, the revelations about the sloppy investigation, the glaring evidence that pointed to a stranger in her home that night, her victory in court, the judge's admonition of the McIntosh detectives and the district attorney, the multi-million-dollar judgment, still to this day many inside the McIntosh Police Department, as well as the entire district attorney's office, believed that Alex had killed her family. The official position of the McIntosh Police Department and the district attorney's office was that the slaying of Dennis, Helen, and Raymond Quinlan was the result of a botched home invasion. The claim was that an intruder had entered the home to steal jewelry and other valuables, but was startled by Mr. Quinlan. The prowler killed Dennis Quinlan and then hastily shot his wife and son in a mad dash to escape the scene. The theory was weak and ignored two key bits of evidence found inside the Quinlan home that pointed to something much more sinister than a burglary gone bad. First were the mysterious photos discovered in her parents' bed the night they were killed. The photos held images of 3 unidentified women, and Alex knew they played a role in understanding why her parents were killed. But the photos did not fit the narrative put forth by the McIntosh police, so they were dismissed and never revealed to the public. The other bit of evidence was a lone fingerprint lifted from Alex's bedroom window. The window she had opened before aborting her idea of jumping 2 stories to safety. The fingerprint belonged to whoever was in her house that night, and painted a clear picture of a killer who was not startled by Dennis Quinlan, but who actively attempted to hunt down his daughter. Put it all together, and Alex knew relying on the authorities to find the truth would be like slipping an envelope into an abandoned mailbox and hoping it found its way to the address scrawled on it. The police were no longer looking for her family's killer because they believed they'd already found her. Alex looked away from the window and settled her gaze on the open folder and the documents resting on the table in front of her. She read through the pages again, even though Alex had long ago committed every detail to memory. The documents had sent her back to London and now across Europe. She would arrive in Switzerland later that night. Then, first thing in the morning, she would visit the Sparhafen Bank in Zurich to find answers. As she stared at the pages, her mind drifted back to the night she'd found them. It was the night she'd snuck into her old home on Montgomery Lane, the first time she'd stepped foot inside the house since it all had happened. The first time she had returned since taking refuge behind the grandfather clock the night her family was killed. The first and the last. That visit, meant for a different purpose altogether, had started her on her current journey. Now, as the train rocked its way into Switzerland and her eyes skimmed over the pages, snippets of the hot August night when she made that secret trek to her old home came back to her. Besides the occasional news van parked at random times out front, the house was left to itself, quiet and dark and eerie. Detectives and forensic teams had long since stopped invading the home. They had determined nothing more was to be found inside. All clues had been uncovered and every speck of evidence collected. More than 2 years after yellow crime scene tape first roped off the property, bits of it still remained. Remnants wrapped around a few tree trunks twirled in the breeze. A few strips still crisscrossed the front and back entryways. The presence of the crime scene tape was not an indication of a formal or ongoing investigation. The police, Alex, knew, no longer cared about 421 Montgomery Lane. The tape remained because, as the new owner of the property, Alex had yet to hire someone to clean the place. She had used a portion of her settlement money to purchase the house out of foreclosure. Alex hadn't purchased the home to live there. That would never be possible after the things she'd witnessed. She'd purchased it because she couldn't watch the house fall into the hands of true crime vagrants who might turn the place into some sort of morbid museum. It was because of those delinquents that Alex felt an urgency to get inside now. She needed to collect something near and dear to her heart before the fanatics who continued to trespass onto the property eventually found their way to the attic and pillaged what was there. Alex worry as she tiptoed through the shadows of the yard and toward the back door was that there were true crime junkies in the house, now taking selfies in the master bedroom. She'd seen many such photos splashed around the internet over the last few months. Smiling idiots and self-proclaimed citizen detectives standing in front of her parents' bed snapping photos of themselves with the blood-spattered wall behind them and promising to find justice. Such assholes, Alex thought. The dehumanizing of the event sickened her every time she saw one of those photos. How, she had always wondered, could people be so obsessed with the events of that night as to forget or not care that real people had died? She twisted the handle to the back door, knowing from her previous attempts that the lock had been jimmied and broken by the lunatics who had invaded her home, to have a look around like it was an abandoned museum. On earlier visits to the house, she had made it this far, to the threshold of the kitchen door, before retreating, unable to walk inside. But she was determined this time around. In the morning, she was leaving for her second year at University of Cambridge and had no more time to waffle. She wouldn't return until Christmas. It was now or never. Alex pushed open the door and listened as it squeaked into the night. She allowed no time for her mind to flash back to the night her family was killed. No time for her brain to conjure up memories of the gunshots or the fear. No time for those memories to convince her to turn around and run back to Donna and Garrett's house. Instead, she walked inside and closed the door. The flashlight on her cell phone was all that fought against the blackness. The smell, although stale with mold and dormancy, reminded her of her old life. Through the damp odor of wood damage and the musty summer heat that had penetrated the walls, she smelled her mother and her father and her brother. Forcing herself forward, she walked through the kitchen and into the front foyer. The soft glow of the moon cast tarnished shadows of the window grids onto the floor. She paused at the spot where she remembered the shotgun lying. She looked up to the second-story hallway that overlooked the foyer and remembered staring through the spindles as she hid behind the grandfather clock. After a deep breath, she started up the steps. On each of her previous attempts, the image of the staircase had been what stopped her from entering the house, because she knew that climbing the stairs would bring her to the exact location where it all had happened. She pushed on and took the steps one at a time, closing her eyes as she came to the top. She was careful to keep the glow of her cell phone away from the master bedroom to her right. Alex had no interest in going near that room, or catching even a glimpse of the red-stained hardwood outside of it. She turned quickly at the landing and headed down the hallway toward her old bedroom, but she stopped nearly as soon as she started. In front of her, at the end of the hall, was the grandfather clock that had saved her life. It glowed eerily under the spell of her cell phone's flashlight, reflecting a splinter of light back at her that came and went, came and went, came and went, came and went. It was then that Alex realized the clock was still ticking. In this house void of electricity and life, the grandfather clock was alive. And, well, She walked closer until she could hear the subtle click of the clock's inner workings. The only explanation was that the vagrants who frequently trespassed had wound the clock. She admired the clock for another second or two before raising her cell phone to the ceiling. She found a cord hanging above her head, reached up and pulled on it, unlocking the stairway to the attic. She fumbled with the sliding staircase and then pointed her cell phone into the dark hole in the ceiling before she started her ascent. Once she crested the opening and her torso was in the attic, a different smell struck her. It was another flavor of must and mold, and it brought back a whole other set of memories. This smell reminded her of Christmas. Every year, her parents lowered this door in the ceiling, and one by one, the Quinlans climbed into the attic to retrieve boxes and boxes of decorations. Now, Alex was not after ornaments or knickknacks. On this night, she was after something else. She shined her light past the decorations and into the corner of the attic. There she found boxes that she and Raymond had stashed years earlier. For as long as her brother had lived, he had dreamed of being a Major League Baseball player. It was the only way Alex remembered him, in a baseball cap and dirty uniform. Alex had blocked those memories for the past year or so. It was too difficult to remember Raymond in his uniform and on the baseball diamond, because those memories brought with them terrible bouts of guilt and remorse. Someday, she hoped to be able to allow those images of her brother to flow freely through her mind. She missed him badly, and a deep ache came to her heart every time she pushed Raymond from her thoughts. But Raymond was the reason she had come to her old house. From the time he was a little kid, Raymond had collected baseball cards. Out of all the things Alex had left behind, for some reason she could not allow Raymond's baseball card collection to fall into the hands of groupies, who would eventually discover the attic, raid everything it held, and pawn it all on the dark web, as relics belonging to the Quinlan crew, who was mowed down by the oldest Quinlan child. She found the box of baseball cards in the corner and pulled it out of the shadows. It was a balancing act to lug the box down the attic stairs. When she made it, she slid the staircase back into place and pushed the attic door closed. The house fell quiet again, but for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock. Before she left, Alex reached to the top of the clock where the crank was kept. She stuck it into the fitting on the side and spun it several times, raising the weights until they were as high as they could go. It wouldn't last a lifetime, but the clock would at least be ticking when Alex landed in London the following day. It was only later that night, as she waited for the hours to pass, unable to sleep as she prepared for the flight back to England, that she discovered the box she had taken from the attic was not filled with her brother's baseball card collection, but foreign bank statements instead. They became the first clue in figuring out who had killed her family. Chapter 9. Wednesday, September 30th, 2015, Zurich, Switzerland, 9:35 a.m. The morning after the train deposited her in Switzerland, Alex sat in a Zurich cafe, sipped espresso, and watched the bank across the street. She checked her phone. She had 25 minutes until her appointment and used 20 of them finishing her coffee and settling her nerves. At 5 minutes to the hour, she gathered the papers she had spent the morning reading, organized them in a leather-bound folder, and slipped them into her rucksack before walking across the street. Despite that, she had dressed in her nicest outfit: long skirt, silk blouse, and a blazer she hadn't worn since the trial. Alex immediately felt out of place when she entered the bank. The eyes of every bank employee focused on her as she stepped into the sprawling lobby. For the past year in Cambridge, she was used to blending in and being invisible. But a 20-year-old kid walking into this type of bank was uncommon. She was sure the typical client was middle-aged and carried an important title behind their name. The woman behind the enormous reception counter, a block of marble that shined brightly, hesitated a moment before she asked, "Can I help you?" "Alex Quinlan. I have an appointment with Samuel McEwen." The woman checked the ledger with a confused expression. Surely there was some mistake. Alex could sense the woman's inner thoughts protesting. But after the woman pulled up the schedule of appointments and checked Alex's ID, she offered a hesitant smile. Have a seat. Mr. McEwen will be right with you. Alex sat on a stiff couch that looked like it belonged in a stuffy mansion, and not in the middle of a bank. But this bank was like no other she'd seen, and she'd seen plenty over the last year as she'd met with money managers and financial advisors and attorneys who told her how to handle the fortune that came her way after the trial. But none of those American banks were like this one. Everything here was marble and granite that shined from the brilliant sunlight that rained down through vaulted glass from 3 stories above. This was a place where the wealthy stashed their treasure, and Alex guessed the couch and the granite and the marble and the dazzling sunlight were all carefully crafted to make the rich feel rich. Her parents had not been wealthy, at least not openly. They lived in a modest home, and Alex and her brother had attended public school. Family vacations were never more extravagant than a week in Florida. Although her parents were business owners, theirs was a 2-man tax, an accounting firm. Dennis and Helen Quinlan were the accountants, the managers, and the janitors. So how was it? Alex wondered since that hot night in August just a month earlier that she had found a box in the attic stuffed with statements for an account from this Zurich bank worth $5 million. She was convinced the answer to that question would lead to her family's killer. She waited 5 minutes until a young man in a suit and squarely knotted tie approached her. He couldn't have been much older than she, Alex thought, as she looked him up and down. "Ems, Quinlan," the young man said, extending his hand. "Drew Estes. I'm Mr. McEwen's assistant. He'll be with you in a moment. If you come with me, I'll show you to his office." After more than a year in Cambridge, Alex had become proficient at breaking through dialects and accents to understand the English underneath. But she had learned during this trip across Europe that the English dialects varied, not just from country to country, but throughout different regions of each country. Here in Switzerland, English-speaking Swiss carried heavy tones of either French or German. Drew Estes' accent was thick German with British undertones, which took Alex a moment to decipher. "Thank you," Alex said, standing and shaking his hand. As he held her hand, Alex noticed Drew Estes stare at her for a second too long before squinting his eyes and tilting his head. "Have we met before?" he asked. "No," Alex said. "Are you sure? You look familiar." Alex smiled. "I'm sure. This is my first time in Switzerland." It had happened a few times in the streets of Cambridge, and once or twice on campus. Someone she met asked if they knew her from some other place or time. Not even an ocean could fully separate Alex from infamy. But as the months passed and her freshman year concluded, her notoriety faded, and no one looked twice at her again. Until now. Until Drew Estes stared at Alex with a probing glare that made her skin crawl. "How long did you say Mr. McEwen would be?" Alex finally asked. "Oh," Drew said. "I'm sorry. I'm staring at you like I have my ass in hat. Not long. He's finishing a meeting. I'll show you to his office." A minute later, the young man showed Alex into an elaborate office. "Can I get you anything?" he asked from the doorway. "Coffee or water?" "No thanks," Alex said. "Thank you, Drew," a man said as he walked into the office. "I'm Samuel McEwen. We spoke on the phone." Alex smiled and shook his hand, relieved to be away from the attention of Drew Estes. "Alex Quinlan." McEwen smiled and shook his head. "I'm sorry. I was expecting someone older." "Nope, just me." "Right then. Have a seat." McEwen motioned to a chair in front of his desk. "Thanks, Drew. I'll call if I need anything." Drew Estes smiled from the doorway. Alex felt his stare linger for another moment before he left. Samuel McEwen sat behind his desk and tapped the keyboard. "So you're interested in making a transfer of funds from an American bank into ours, is that correct?" "Yes," Alex said. McEwen continued to read from the screen. "I see you've already completed the paperwork. We'll have just a few more documents today. And what is the amount of the transfer?" $1 million, Alex said. McEwen looked up from his computer, paused a moment, and then nodded. Alex could sense his desire to ask how a 20-year-old kid had gotten her hands on $1 million. He likely suspected that she was a snot-nosed trust fund baby, and Alex wished that were the case. The media scrutiny in America, which had reached fever pitch during her trial against the state of Virginia, had transitioned into a buzzing fervor when the trial concluded with a verdict that awarded Alex $16 in damages, reduced by the judge to just over $8. Other than purchasing her family's home out of foreclosure and normal living expenses, Alex hadn't touched any of the money. Today would be the first time she'd put any of it to use. Today, she would use it for leverage. Very well, McEwen said. Do you have the paperwork and information from the American institution? Alex pulled the folder from her backpack and handed over the information. McEwen scanned the page quickly. I'll need to verify this. Do you have a photo ID? Alex handed over her ID card. This will take a few minutes. Sure, Alex said. Samuel McEwen left his office and disappeared for 15 minutes. When he returned, he carried a jubilant smile. It was funny what money could do. Everything checks out, he said. We should be able to make the transfer without incident and have everything wrapped up this morning. Alex spent the next hour filling out forms and signing her name at the bottom of a dozen documents. When they finished, she was the proud new owner of a Swiss bank account at the Sparhafen Bank in Zurich, where $1 million now resided, transferred from a brokerage account in America. Samuel McEwen promised to keep in touch and help Alex with any further banking needs. Just let me know if there is anything else I can do for you, he said. There is, actually, Alex said, now that she had the man's attention, now that he took her seriously. McEwen offered a warm smile. Of course. From her folder, Alex removed a piece of paper. This is an old statement from your bank, Alex said, handing the page across the desk. I found it in my father's belongings and wanted to know if you could give me any information about the account. McEwen took the page and analyzed it. After a moment of study, he spoke while still scanning the information. This is a numbered account. No formal name is attached to it. Yes, Alex said. I figured that much out. But my father's accounting firm is listed as the custodian. I'm looking for information about the account owner and why my parents' firm was listed as a curator. I can't offer information about private accounts, Ms. Quinlan. Perhaps you should ask your father. He's dead. The bluntness caught McEwen off guard. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Here's the thing, Alex said. Both my parents have passed. Everything they had now belongs to me, according to their will. Alex slid her parents' last will and testament across the desk. You'll see that I'm listed as the sole beneficiary. So when I found this bank statement in my father's belongings, I figured I'd try to get to the bottom of it. As in, does this account still exist? Ms. Quinlan, I'm not able to provide information on this account without proper documentation proving what you're telling me is true. And even then, there would be many legal hoops to jump through. I'm just trying to figure out if the account still exists, and if it does, who opened it. I have more money I need to invest, and if you could do me this favor, I'd consider your bank for my other investments. I see, McEwen said. I'm honored to serve you in any way I can. He then added, handing the pages back to her. Unfortunately, I'm not able to help with this. There are laws that prohibit me from doing what you're asking, and I'm afraid I'd be no use to you, or any of my other clients, if I lost my license. Alex removed a different sheet of paper from the folder and slid it across the desk. I have another $1 million. I'd be willing to move to your bank if you could help me with this. I just need a name. Ms. Quinlan, I'm terribly sorry. I'm not at liberty to give you information about a numbered account without proper documentation proving the account belongs to you. This will be the case no matter how much money you invest with us." Alex stood and smiled. The old version of herself may have stewed and protested at this obstacle in her path. The new Alex would simply find another way around it. If the last 2 years had taught her anything, it was that sitting on the sidelines, frozen with inaction, brought nothing good to her life. "Thank you for your time," she said before leaving. Chapter 10. Wednesday, September 30th, 2015. Zurich, Switzerland, 11:30 a.m. Drew Estes watched from his cubicle as the girl walked out of the bank. He had recognized her immediately. It was the eyes that gave her away. He and his girlfriend had followed the story of Alexandra Quinlan closely. The previous year, they had even driven past the infamous house in America where empty eyes had killed her family. Holidaying in the States, Drew and his girlfriend had taken 2 weeks to tour New York City and Washington, D.C. They finished the trip by spending a week hiking the Appalachian Trail. True crime fanatics. Neither Drew nor his girlfriend could pass up the opportunity to see the infamous house in McIntosh, Virginia, where Alexandra Quinlan had mowed down her family. Now, a year later, Empty Eyes herself had walked into the bank in Switzerland, where Drew temped. An hour earlier, he had assisted Mr. McEwen in pulling all the forms and running the checks necessary to establish a new account for Alex Quinlan in the amount of $1 million. The fortune Empty Eyes had gotten away with, at least a small fraction of it, was now parked in an account in the bank where Drew Estes worked. It was almost too surreal to believe. Drew had followed the Alexandra Quinlan case forward and backward, and paid close attention to the court case when she sued the police and the state prosecutor's office. Drew knew she had gotten away with much more than $1 million, and the world had frantically searched for her ever since. Somehow, miraculously, Drew Estes had found her. After helping Mr. McEwen complete his morning, Drew took his lunch break. He walked outside and lit a cigarette, which hung from Roy, his lips as he swiped his cell phone. "Hey, babe," he said when his girlfriend answered. "You'll never believe who just walked into the bank this morning." The call lasted 5 minutes. By the time his cigarette burned to the filter, Drew Estes had hatched his plan. Chapter 11. Wednesday, September 30th, 2015, Zurich, Switzerland, 9:41 p.m. Alex sat at the corner of the bar and sipped tonic water with lime. The language barrier had made it difficult to convince the bartender to fill her glass with only ice and tonic water, without adding gin or vodka. She would turn 21 in a short few months, making her of legal drinking age in the States. Here in Europe, she'd been free to purchase and consume alcohol since she first stepped foot on campus, but neither alcohol nor drugs had ever appealed to her. Probably because in high school, where many kids start to dabble in such things, her time had been cut short, and the friends with whom Alex might have done the dabbling had abandoned her after she was sent to juvenile detention. And despite the acceleration to independence the last 2 years had brought, deep inside she was still the girl whose mother would kill her if she smoked a joint or considered swallowing any of the many pills she watched fellow students ingest during her first year of higher education. There was another reason, too, that Alex steered clear of alcohol. She could see a clear path where the numbing effects of booze could take away at least some of her angst and guilt. Perhaps that path would be easier than the one she had chosen. But the easy path led only to self-pity, not to answers or enlightenment, a place she was determined to find. She stirred her drink and thought back on her day. Her attempt to discover the name of the person behind the numbered account her parents had presided over had failed. Alex was convinced it was the key to unlocking the rest of the mysteries about that night. All the unknowns swirled through her thoughts now, with the same two rising to the surface as they always did. The photos left on her parents' bed the night they were killed, and the fingerprint discovered on her bedroom window. Alex had learned of the photos only during her defamation case when Garrett presented them as further evidence of how badly mismanaged the investigation had been. At best, Garrett had argued. The McIntosh police had dismissed the photos as immaterial. More likely, though, the district attorney had attempted to suppress their presence because they did not fit into the narrative that Alex had been the one who killed her parents. The pictures had always been a baffling piece of an already complex puzzle. But since discovering the foreign bank statements hidden in the attic, Alex had created a barely tangible theory that linked the photos to the lone fingerprint found on her bedroom window. Being present inside the home the night her family was killed had provided Alex with certain irrefutable truths about that night. One of them was that the shooter had entered her bedroom and pushed her window fully open. It didn't take much to recall the sound of the window squeaking as she hid behind the grandfather clock, so the lone fingerprints sequestered from the window pane undoubtedly belonged to the shooter. Neither the McIntosh Police Department nor Garrett Lancaster, during his own quest to prove Alex's innocence, had been able to match the fingerprint to its owner. Garrett tapped his sources and had the print run through the integrated automated fingerprint identification system inside the FBI. No hits, but ever since stumbling over the bank documents in her attic, Alex had begun to form a theory that perhaps the lone fingerprint sequestered from her bedroom window belonged to the person who owned the account, and perhaps discovering the identity of this man would shed light on the women in the photos. Her visit to Sparhofen Bank, however, had failed badly. The dead end was frustrating by itself, without considering the other problem it created. The $1 million she transferred had surely sounded alarm bells back home. Before turning over the $8 million awarded to her in the verdict, the judge had put restrictions in place. The most obstructive was that a certified financial advisor had to look after the money and offer guidance until Alex turned the arbitrary age of 27. Then, the money was hers to invest, spend, or squander as she wished. Until that point, however, every dime she touched left a trail that found its way to Garrett Lancaster's desk. Garrett had always given Alex a wide berth, and despite him being a major part of her life, she never dealt with him directly on money matters. Instead, a financial advisor signed off on her spending. But despite this middleman arrangement, Alex was certain Garrett saw every dime she spent. It might take a little time to notice the transfer of $1 million to a Swiss bank. It could be a day or a week. But eventually, her financial guy would see the transfer and pick up the phone to call Garrett, who would then pick up the phone to call Alex. This, unfortunately, was her life. Alex withdrew a modest amount each month for living expenses, all of which came from interest. Garrett was adamant that Alex never touched the principal, but live only off interest, the lump sum generated. As a 20-year-old who owned nothing other than a vacant single-family home in McIntosh, Virginia, living off interest was not difficult. Moving $1 million to a bank in Zurich was bound to raise red flags back home. She had a contingent plan prepared for when Garrett's phone call came. Alex had written out her response and was still committing each detail to memory. The bottom line was that the money was hers, no matter what the judge told her or however many strings were attached to it, and she could do with it what she pleased. She wanted to open a Swiss bank account. She would tell Garrett for tax purposes. Alex knew nothing about international tax laws, other than what she had quickly researched online as she'd hatched her plan. But it was enough. She hoped to sound convincing when Garrett called. She would ramble on about her reasoning, circuitously explaining her thought process, and would even go so far as to apologize for having the gall to touch her own money. What she would not do, however, was tell Garrett the truth. That she had moved $1 million to the bank in Zurich, because she hoped doing so would get her closer to the truth about what happened to her family. That quest was hers, and hers alone. She took another sip of tonic water, opened her phone, and scrolled through the train schedules for the following day. At the other end of the bar, a couple sat in a booth. Their focus shifted from Alex to the man's phone and continued to go back and forth. Finally, Drew Estes zoomed in on the picture of Alexandra Quinlan. He smiled at his girlfriend as they continued to look from the phone to the girl at the bar. It's her, Drew said. I can't believe it, but it's her. Laverne Parker nodded. Fucking right, it's her. She ditched the glasses and cut her hair, but look at those eyes. You can't miss them. How much did she deposit? $1 million US. I saw it on my boss's computer and helped create the paperwork. $1 million bucks, Vern said, her expression contemptuous as she stared across the bar. Alexandra Quinlan, before our very eyes. Vern smiled to reveal crooked teeth as she broke into a whispered sing-song. We know who you are. She placed the phone on the table. Alex's image remained on the screen. They gave her, like, 10 mil, Vern said as she continued to stare at Alex. Vern went back to the sing-song voice. You tried to disappear, but we know where you are. Chapter 12. Friday, October 2nd, 2015. Cambridge, England 2:15 p.m. The idea for the board came to Alex after a particularly lucid dream about the night her family was killed. Her dreams had become so vivid since escaping the circus of her old life in the United States that Alex had taken to writing down every detail she could remember about them as soon as she woke. She purchased a cork board from a craft store, a 4-foot by 4-foot square, and hung it on the kitchen wall to collect her thoughts. Class schedules and dates of upcoming midterm exams should have been pegged to it. Photos, too, of family and friends. Instead, Alex pinned index cards around the board that contained every detail she could remember about the night her family was killed. In addition to new facts she'd uncovered in her year-long pursuit for answers. The most recent addition to the board was a photo of the Sparhafen Bank in Zurich, next to which was one of the bank statements she'd found in the attic. On the far left-hand side of the board was an index card with the words home invasion written across it, and then ised out by a red Sharpie. The home invasion theory, which was the current position taken by the Macintosh PD, was subterfuge. The department needed to blame the murders on someone after their lead suspect had been acquitted, so they settled on burglary gone bad. It was a lazy and uninspired theory, and had been proven false 1,000 times over. A home invasion for the purpose of burglary came with a motive to steal, but nothing was missing from the Quinlan home. Plus, the Macintosh PD's explanation of events did not match what Alex knew. She had been watching from her bedroom when her brother was killed, and had been hiding behind the grandfather clock when the killer entered Alex's room looking for the last remaining member of the Quinlan family. The killer had not been startled by Alex's father, as was suggested by the incompetent detectives who attempted to explain the scene. For that to be the case, her dad would have had to stumble upon the killer. That her father had been shot while lying in bed, under the covers and likely sound asleep, proved the Macintosh Police Department's official line not only impossible, but stunningly incompetent. The middle of the board held the pictures found on her parents' bed of 3 women, and an image of the fingerprint lifted from her bedroom window. On the far right-hand side of the board was a detailed timeline of that day. It included every detail Alex remembered from nearly every minute of that late afternoon and evening, starting with the moment she arrived home from school and proceeding to her going to bed for the night, and ultimately being woken by the gunshot. The details were painstakingly specific, including such particulars as the exact physics chapter she studied that night for homework, Newton's first law of motion, which Alex had written on an index card. An object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. It was a mantra that ran through her thoughts at odd times during the past 2 years. The board's location in the kitchen, next to where Alex hung her jacket each day, ensured that her thoughts never drifted far from that fateful night. Wa, Sheol, Ayon. The day after Alex returned from Zurich, she looked at the board before grabbing her coat on the way out of her apartment and headed to campus. The ruse started halfway through freshman year when Alex returned to the States to spend Christmas break with the Lancasters. By then, Alex knew that college in Europe, or anywhere else for that matter, was not for her. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to tell Donna and Garrett. The lie continued through the second semester of her freshman year and persisted over the past summer. Alex wasn't sure how long she would lie about college. Technically enrolled, she had yet to step foot in a classroom during her second year. At some point, she'd come clean to Donna and Garrett, if for no other reason than it would start an argument. Free from the reins of authority at the ripe age of 18, Alex now longed for someone to tell her what to do. She wanted someone to disobey. She craved an argument with someone who wanted the best for her. An argument would mean there was someone watching out for her, caring about where her decisions took her and what impact they had on her life. This desire for affection was the only reason Alex stepped foot on campus each week. Donna and Garrett sent one letter a week, always to her university address. Perhaps this was their way of making sure Alex was at least occasionally on campus. The only reason she still had an active mailbox at the university was because the tuition had been paid in full. Alex Quinlan existed on the ledger of Cambridge University, and her account was in good standing. No one on campus would pay her any mind until the next tuition bill came due, or until midterms revealed not just failing grades, but no recorded grades at all. That impending doom was like a far-off asteroid. At first, it was nothing more than a speck in the sky too far away to cause much angst. But now, a month into her second year, Alex was walking in the shadow of that approaching asteroid. As long as she had answers to look for and clues to follow, however, she could convince herself to ignore it. Alex strolled through campus, crossing a bridge that arched over the stream that wound through the grounds. Nostalgic for what this era of her life might look like, had she been able to lead a normal existence. When she reached the registrar's office, Alex walked inside and headed to a wall of mailboxes. She inserted her key and removed a small stack of envelopes, then shuffled through them looking for Donna and Garrett's letter. "Weren't you in my criminology class last year?" the girl next to her asked. The accent was heavy and mixed, and Alex didn't immediately recognize it. Students came to Cambridge from across all of Europe, and there were too many dialects and accents to keep track of. Alex looked up from sorting her mail. The girl had a set of keys in her hands and was preparing to open her mailbox. Alex studied the girl and tried to place the face, but was certain she'd never seen her before. Although Alex had enrolled in criminology the first semester of freshman year and had occasionally attended the class, so it was entirely possible that Alex had indeed crossed paths with this girl. Yeah, I think so, Alex said. "Professor McAtee?" Alex nodded. That might have been the name of the professor who taught the class, but she couldn't remember. "Yeah." The girl smiled. "I thought I recognized you. I'm Laverne." "Alex. Did you do okay?" Alex paused a moment. "With what?" "Criminology. McAtee can be a real pain in the ass. I got out with a C and was lucky to get that." Alex had passed with a D main too. "I got a C." "Ah, cream of the crop you and I are. You know what they call C students after 4 years of school?" Alex waited. "University graduates." Alex forced a smile. "Right." "Hey," Laverne said. "I'm meeting some mates tonight for a drink. You want to join us?" "Oh." Alex smiled and shook her head. "I can't tonight. I've got some, studying to do." "On a Friday night? You're a committed one, aren't you?" Alex closed her eyes at the terrible lie she'd been caught in. "Ah, the hell with it," Alex said. "Sure, I can grab a drink. Where and when?" The girl smiled. "The old ticket off is at 8. It'll just be me and a couple girlfriends. I could swing by and we could go together. That way you're not walking into the pub with your ass in hat." The idiom pinged some vague memory in Alex's mind. Was it a warning or just confusion? Whichever, it was too faint to make more. Then a ripple when it splashed into her subconscious. "Where are you from?" Laverne asked. I mean America, obviously. But what part? Alex paused, fighting the colliding thoughts as her mind worked to figure out what had bothered her a moment before. She had always avoided talking about herself to other students. "You all right there, mate?" Laverne asked. Chicago." "Really? The blowing city, isn't it called? The Windy City, Torto, wow." "That's it," Laverne shrugged. "I don't have any mates from the States. You'll be my first." Alex smiled. She hadn't had a friend for quite some time. "Where do you live?" Laverne asked. "I'll stop over and pick you up on my way. We'll be best mates for the night." As if Alex were helpless to stop it, her address slipped from her lips while Laverne punched it into her phone. "About 7:45, Laverne asked. Alex swallowed hard and forced a smile. "Sounds good,"